Okay. Okay. What's going on, everybody? This is Future Automation, a place where imagination meets reality. And welcome to another episode of Weekend Talks. And we are here with Michelle, and we are going to unravel the mysteries of cloud technology. So, welcome, Michelle. And I really thank you for giving your time on this podcast. And I was really excited to speak to you since we had a talk in the Oracle meetup. So, that's really great. Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
And yeah, let's get started. So before going to the lots of question and answer and discussions, can you give a quick brief intro about yourself, like where you work and how much experience you have in this field, and uh, your expertise? Just a quick
sure.
one. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, I'm from the Netherlands. I live in Amsterdam, or a city near to Amsterdam, actually, but I always say Amsterdam because that's more well known. And I work in IT since 23 years now. I've done a study of pharmacy, and after that, I switched to IT. And at the moment, I've left my old company, which I worked almost 12 years for, Quality, and I'm now working for Kyndryl. And Kyndryl, I'm their associate director for infrastructure cloud, and I'm working on an account for them on the Dutch Ministry of Defense, and we're working to shift the entire environment to a cloud native environment. And I'm designing lots of stuff. It's highly confidential, so I can't speak too much about it, but that's a little bit about what I do now.
Correct, correct. Okay, that's great. I think the transition from pharmacy to IT must have been a bit tough.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think this is a long career right now that you are at.
yeah, exactly. It,
Yeah.
it took a lot of knowledge and a lot of switches around customers, which I've done in the past few years. But now I'm focused on one specific program slash project, which is also good. Yeah.
hmm Great, great. So thank you for the quick intro. And since you are you are speaking about cloud infrastructure, I have seen that a lot of companies are migrating to cloud now, and they're seeing cloud is one of the best option that people are right now migrating rather than on-prem servers or other physical servers. So can you share some real world examples on what exactly cloud has benefited to the business and how this has been transformed, like what at what level the businesses are transformed when it comes to migrating to clouds, like why, what was the reason why they have been migrating to clouds, a lot of companies.
A lot of companies are were investing in hardware and software and data centers and everything, um, which can be good, but it's also a thing that you have when you order your data center. You order it for several years. It's an investment which you have to do, and some of the companies didn't want to do that anymore because they were not primarily focused. Their primarily focus wasn't actually IT, computers, and everything. So they thought all these things. Why should we do it ourselves? Can we better can let it do a company which is highly specialized in those areas. So they said, well, we only want to focus on our business functionalities, on our applications, maybe, but we don't want to be uh, busy with all kinds of things like infrastructure and servers and hardware and everything. And that's why for those companies, it's yeah, a very good thing. There's something such a thing as like cloud, because they can outsource everything which is non related for their business.
Okay. Okay. I think one of the things that I also realized being in this industry for around 3 years, not too much, but I think one thing that I found out that companies are finding it too reliable that someone else can take care of, the scalings or, the take care of the hardware, the services as you're saying, rather than doing it by their own. And that makes them to focus on their own product or on their own work a bit more than, getting stuck into physical servers or data centers and then assigning specific people to manage that data center. So I think that is really one thing that might also have been the reason that they are, getting migrated to cloud.
Yeah, and with the
Yes.
Go module, which in that model you can, yeah, more or less predict about what you what you use, like you're using electricity or any other service which you get out of the wall. You know
Correct.
how much electricity you have been used, and that's the same within cloud. You can pay by the hour almost. So you can say,
Correct.
well,
Correct.
I don't need this resource anymore, so let's skip that one, and it saves you some costs.
Yeah. So one more thing, like now, since we are discussing about the migration, one thing that I found out that people like the startups or maybe the people who are working as cloud engineer in startup, there is a lot of confusion in selecting a specific vendor or provider. So what do you think is a like are few critical factors that are needed to be considered while selecting a good provider or a good vendor for the cloud?
Some critical factors around the for the company which are selecting the cloud. You mean?
Correct.
That-
Correct.
That's the question, right?
Hmm. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, critical factors are when you select a cloud provider that you have some factors to consider, like reliability and your uptime. So a cloud provider should have a good track record about what they can guarantee you about downtime and all kinds of uh, impact on business operations, for instance. Scalability and flexibility, of course. Every cloud provider provides some scalability and flexibility, but you have to be aware that or you have to be sure that you can scale up your resources or scale down your resources easily, um, based on your business needs. So, which can provide a lot of cost efficiency. And
Hmm.
I also think you have to consider something like performance, latency things, because everything is going over the network, of course. Now, when you use a data center, which is also uh, in the past was always located at the office, but now it's also not located anymore, but in large data centers. But still, you have to consider, because you more or less sometimes share your cloud environment with other customers, perhaps. And performance and latency are very important for your applications, especially if your infrastructure is geographically distributed. So you have to take care of that latency factor as well. And if you have a global company uh, uh, using a lot of locations, then you have to realize that it can be have an impact on your performance and your latency. And I think also regulatory requirements, like here in Europe, for instance, you have requirements, regulatory requirements around privacy, which is different than in the US, for instance, where there are other regulations to consider. In here we have, for instance, the GDPR, and in the Netherlands it's called AVG, which is around all kinds of security things. And you have to also be aware that the majority of the cloud providers are from the US. So in Europe, there is no real cloud provider. So although the locations of the cloud providers are in Europe, it's still a US company. Well, you've seen how it went when another president came by and was saying all kinds of things around Europe. You should consider that when you move your business to a vendor which is a multinational. And
Hmm.
I think also cost and pricing is also a good thing to evaluate that. So be aware of that pricing structure of the cloud provider can be somewhat different. So you have to have something in place for monitoring these costs and analysis of the cost. Have a good analysis of what might you might expect, so that the cost after a month don't surprise you at the moment when you get the bill. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that these are all kinds of factors you have to consider when you go to the cloud.
Correct, correct. Yeah. So one thing, like as you know, from a business perspective, I think the business has to focus a lot on the cost of the cost they're adding up to the migration from traditional infrastructure to the cloud. So one thing
Mm.
that always comes up in my mind is like, uh, so what do you think is how did the cost saving enhanced from moving the cloud from a traditional infrastructure to the from a cloud, nor from a like a long cloud, like from a different vendor, like is a GCP or Azure or Amazon, for example. So how did the businesses were able to enhance their cost savings from traditional infrastructure to the cloud?
Yeah. So you have these traditional, or you have these well-known models like capture and operational expenditure. So if you look at the
Hmm.
capital expenditure, where you have to require your own software, purchasing hardware, software, setting up your data centers, you have to hire people for that. Um, and when you moved into the cloud, you all remove that part. So the costs around building up a data center and all the software and all the kinds of stuff, which is in fact all kind of a repetitive piece of work. So within the cloud, you can uh, spin up a data center within maybe a few days or so, and that's all being taken care of. You don't need to invest in that anymore. Of course, you have to pay for it. That's true, but you don't have to buy your hardware and do an investment upfront, but you pay afterwards actually. So that's a thing. And also your operational cost can be deducted, because a lot of things like electricity, cooling systems are not you don't have to take care of that anymore. And also a lot of management and installation things, which usually administrators did, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to worry about that anymore, because the cloud vendor usually offers some kind of a model with where that can all be handled. So other
Hmm.
things like, well, I already mentioned it, scalability and elasticity.
Correct.
Elasticity, you also mentioned it. So you can
Hmm.
scale up, scale down on the business needs or the needs of your company. So that's highly flexible as well. So that's also a cost saving thing, because you don't use too much. You just use what you need actually. So
Correct.
in all day situations, it's not entirely true, because you need to have a good administration of your cloud to watch over the resources which are used and which are not used. And you can, well, maybe automate, like your test environments. They have to go down every night, for instance, because you don't use them. And for the weekend, you can switch them off as well. So you also need to have a good administration of that as well, to get the
Correct.
benefit
Correct.
of it. Yeah.
Hmm. Correct.
And
So I think
yeah.
one thing, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
No, no, you go, you go.
One thing that I think that I assume, or maybe that is true, that instead of taking, like, a whole bunch of people in a physical infrastructure, the main thing that changed was that now we can have one main expert who can be a cloud administrator, as you said, who can, will be aware of automating this stuff, of when to scale down, when to scale up, whether it is vertical or horizontal. And the flexibility that cloud is providing is, now if it is a horizontal or a vertical scale up, we don't have to physically go and buy stuff. We have to
Yeah.
just tell them, okay, we need one more hard drive, just add it in my cloud, and I think they'll be able to do it. So that is what it's more of a cost and a convenience balance that
Mm.
business is having now, because of which they are trying to move to a cloud instead of a traditional infrastructure, is what I believe is
Yeah.
really good going on right now. Yeah, so you were
And
saying something. Yeah.
it's still evolving, I think, as well, because
Correct.
uh, if you look here in the Netherlands, I don't know how it's in India. I think the US is maybe more um, willing to move to the cloud, although you see it here as well. But due to all these regulations in here, the move to the cloud for some, and especially for governments, is really a bit, yeah,
Correct. Correct.
behind. Or they use something like a traditional private cloud model as well, more like
Hmm.
the model of cloud, but not from a public cloud. So they do it on their own. So on the project where I'm now on, it's the same. It's a private cloud, but still with the philosophy of how a cloud works.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I think here also we are having some migrations like going on, but as you said about the regulations, so that's the only concern I think most of the governments they are now having is that the data of that particular country should stay in that country only. So
yeah.
if India is, if Indian government is having something moving to cloud, they'll expect that okay, this should even though it is on cloud, the data center should be in India only and not outside of India. The same goes for most of the governments. That's why still there are a lot of evolvement going on around cloud migration. But hopefully, I think once the laws and the regulations are getting in line with the vendors, then probably I think it might happen in a very smooth flow rather than all the complications that are being faced right now.
Like Microsoft has a government cloud, I think, something called like
Yes,
that,
yes,
and
correct, correct.
Oracle is moving to something similar. I don't know how Oracle it calls, but it's also something like a more like privacy cloud thing. I don't know
Hmm,
actually
hmm, hmm,
what
hmm.
it calls, but I saw it
Correct.
recently. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah.
even Amazon is providing some on-prem cloud kind of tech so that all the private or the important and confidential data will be that place only. But as you said, with the philosophy of cloud computing, what exactly it is based on the foundation of.
Yeah, that those are two different things. I think. Oh, you have on-prem cloud where the vendor is physically within the company's boundaries.
Hmm.
Also, but
Correct.
you also have something like a government cloud where Microsoft or Oracle or any other cloud provider has their own locations, but only isolated for government or
Okay.
organizations. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I was not aware of that, but I think yeah, this is also something new. I'll I need to look into that as well. That's really something new information. Yeah, so another important concern for cloud, and I think most of the companies are worried about is security of cloud. So
Mhm.
what how the security differs from a in IT infrastructure based server to cloud. What is the difference between these two? Cloud native security and the traditional security.
Um, yeah. Well, you have something like data governance, where you can have compliancy and all kinds of vital elements within your any cloud strategy, because you have maybe sensitive data in your organization, so you have to be aware that the various regulatory frameworks should adhere to that. So your data governance, you have to be aware that your data is well protected in the cloud as well. So you have to have a some kind of a data governance strategy around data classification, lifecycle management of your data, the quality of your data, the regulations which you have to be aware of. You also need to be compliant around your data, so you have to of course, you have these ISO certifications which you have to be aware of. I know in the Netherlands there are some healthcare insurance organizations which, in my previous job, we did some of their workload in the cloud, but they required an extra ISO standard for that because of the data privacy and everything. So it had to be secure. It had to be hardened. Everything you had to take care of all kinds of encryption, which is actually the default at the moment. But you have to be. We had to implement the SIS security benchmarks, for instance. So for your security to meet some of these requirements, and we also had to reach all kinds of things around the ISO standards, and which was an international ISO standard of, well, I don't know the number anymore, but that doesn't matter. In fact, it was a more highly secured standard than the usual one. So if you go to the cloud, you must be aware that the cloud provider can also provide that kind of standard. And the large ones like Microsoft, Oracle, IBM also, all they all have these standards.
Okay.
Um, yeah, another thing is like encrypt your data in rest and in transition. So you have to have a strategy around encryption of your data. You have to be aware of your access control. So who is doing what in the cloud? Um, yeah, have a good IAM policy. So you have to also implement security standards like NIST standards, cybersecurity framework standards. Yeah,
Hmm.
what I said already around the regulations within Europe, but you also have others. I don't know what kind of regulations you have in India, but around privacy and security. So you have to take care of that and be aware of that, that your cloud provider can leverage that one too. So yeah,
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
know how is
So,
that in India. Do you know
mm-hmm. So yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
how is the security regulation in India? What do you have to be compliant
So,
with?
me being not too much of a security expert, so but one thing I know that here also for cyber security, government is quite serious,
Mhm.
and they are taking that part really very seriously, because I think that, as I said, that Indian government is really very really very strict when it comes to keeping the Indian data at Indian data centers only. That's
Yeah.
why we are now, I think Microsoft has pushed it a bit more to add to more data centers in India as well.
Mhm.
And they are really very serious when it comes to the Indian cyber security as well. But I am not too much of an expert of that. But yeah, I think this is what I've heard till now. But I think, yeah, I'm also a bit more interested in learning about what's going on right now in that domain. So that's why
Yeah.
I have so much questions right
It's a
now.
large area to cover. You can't cover everything because, yeah,
Correct, correct.
when I'm designing now this cloud infrastructure, all these things comes up like security as well, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So two words that I like that popped up in my mind while you were explaining everything. One, so you consider me as a noob, don't know anything about these two words, and then you can explain it a bit more easier. One is data governance. So this term I have heard a lot in lot of meetups. Like people are coming up with this word oftenly, data governance, data governance. That is one, and another is compliance. So these two words, can you just explain it a bit, more in a more easier way, so that the audience, which is not even, those who have not touched the security part as well, a little bit also, might get an idea of what these two are.
Well, compliancy is around if you there are some kind of there's something like a security standard of like you should take care of that your end users are always safe, that their data is always safely handled, that they can rely on what a cloud provider is doing at the moment. Um, so you have to meet some kind of standard around that, and that's very important for a company to choose the specific cloud provider. Um, because they have to be aware of that all the regulations which are in the country, that they are met, and that the cloud provider can guarantee that like the traffic is encrypted, that there's a good role-based access control, for instance, like the data is or the sorry the infrastructure is hardened to standards. And if you have that all in place, then you can say I'm compliant to the security standards which are from for my country or for my area. So if you look at data governance itself, then you have a lot of components around that. You can have like data policy, so how you manage your data around privacy as well, and also like retention. When you have data, how long will you store it, and where will you store it? So do you have to store it like 10 years? There are some governments in the Netherlands which require to store your data for 10 or 15 years. So you have every company has to be aware of to have a solution for storing and archiving older data for, let's say, 10 years to if it's needed, then you have to get it back. Yeah, also access here, who's accessing the data and for what reason. Um, and another thing around data governance is the standards around data, standards around metadata, like you have applications which interoperate with each other. So you have to be aware of how you define your standards for your metadata, for instance, to ensure your consistency. And another thing is the quality of the data. Of course, you have to ensure that your data is accurate. So if a person logs in into their bank account and they see all kinds of things which are not right, then you're not uh, able to uh, yeah, to be aware of you're not able to ensure that the data is consistent and reliable. So you have to be aware of that. If you if your if your data center fails, that your data is still available for the customers and that it's also trustworthy and reliable. um, According to data policies and data retention, you have to also be aware of your data lifecycle management. So you have to know uh, what the life cycle of your data is, when it's maybe it's stale data, also where you create it, how you store it, how you use it, and also this archiving thing, and in the end, the disposal, the deleting of the data. uh, it depends on what kind of data it is. And also, when you look at privacy regulations, you also have to know where you can store data of people, of persons, and you have to take care of that it's not related uh, to data. So person data should not be one to one related to other data. So it should be separated from each other. So these are all kinds of things which are around data governance and compliance actually. So it's in
Okay.
fact comply with regulations, mitigate risks, and derive value from data asset sets.
Mhm. I think one thing that is challenging for either it is a cloud or a traditional infrastructure, which I think like going back 5 years, 6 years, was for traditional and today for cloud as well. Because ultimately, cloud is something that is physical somewhere. So either it is here, or maybe it might be a Europe data center, or it might be an Indian data center, or it might be a US data center. One thing that any vendor faces the challenge is that in countries might have different laws and different compliances which are revolving around the cyber security. So getting aligned with all of them for based on the country that you're putting up your data center might be a bit more challenging that we can think of. So that might be another reason again that companies initially might have faced while setting up the traditional physical infrastructure. And I can
Mm,
only imagine that what was the situation 10 years back before the announcement of cloud, or cloud coming as a trending tech 10 years back. I can only imagine what companies might have faced setting up their data centers in different places or different countries. So I think that is really challenging and kind of a success that today, based on which cloud is evolving again and again and getting too much better than what it was yesterday.
mm, yeah, I agree with
So
that.
yeah. Okay, so next to that is since we are now coming towards security, going to the cloud in a bit more deeper sense, what I want to ask is public, private, and hybrid cloud. So when, say, for example, as a startup guy, I am new, as I have been assigned as a cloud engineer, and I have to decide. So I can say that okay, public is something that we cannot use directly for our data, but for private and hybrid, how do you think which how to select which one is good, and how to decide which one is the better option to select to migrate or maybe set up as a new product in from our company? What is the best considerations that we need to take?
Well, if you look at hybrid clouds, they combine the elements of both public and private. So it can be a choice to have some applications or data which prefer to keep on a private cloud or on premises maybe. Um, and some of the applications could be in the public cloud because you have something like maybe customers which are or applications which are not highly sensible, and some data which needs to be secured and in containered in a secure way. And in this case, the best thing you can do is to choose for a hybrid cloud. So, and if you have something like a private cloud, then actually none of the data goes out. It's a little bit of a closed environment actually, but still with the model of the cloud. So all the specifics around what cloud does is also in that cloud, but it's not public. It's not on the internet. It's all behind firewalls, VPNs, and everything. So yeah,
So one more thing I came into, which came into light when I was in one of the meetup, that is multi-cloud strategy. So this is
mm,
something that I have heard a bit back. I'm not too much aware about it, but what for the viewers, what I understand from the multi-cloud cloud strategy is that having multiple vendors of cloud
yeah,
to make sure
yeah,
that okay, there is no any cloud lock-in or there is no any low time for this. What my question is it good to have a multi-cloud strategy in a maybe in a company in a business? That is one thing. And second is so how do we make sure? Okay, what are the key considerations again uh, to create a proper multi-cloud strategy so as to not mess up in doing so, having multiple cloud vendors. So these are the two questions. So one is it really good to have a multi-cloud strategy? And second is what are the key consideration if multiple having a multi-cloud strategy is good, then what are the key considerations we should have to create a proper multiple cloud strategy?
yeah. Well, I think let me give you an example. Like local governments here in the Netherlands, for instance, I always give a bit of real time examples. They are um, traditionally they have the Microsoft stack for their Office applications and everything, and they have also all kinds of other applications. But then for them, the easy way was to adopt the Microsoft Cloud, which you all already see. They have Azure. A lot of local governments have Azure as their cloud provider and running it over there. But um, I do have some kind of a issue using the term vendor lock-in because it's inevitable. Actually, I think if you if you choose for a technology or a software vendor, then you also choose for what this vendor, software vendor or cloud vendor has to offer you. And the downside of that is that if you want to migrate to another cloud, then it can be as well, because although there are international and global standards, it's still a struggle to migrate from one to the other cloud. But still, I think if it's okay for a company to stay on Microsoft or any other, then I think they should stay there and have a some kind of vendor lock-in. But for enterprise companies, I think it's wise to choose because they already have a lot of technologies. And like if you look at, for instance, Oracle, which is one of the companies which are climbing up in the cloud strategy race, which I read in a few articles last week. If you look at Oracle, they have a good cloud model. They have, of course, their databases which run on their Oracle cloud, and Oracle databases running on AWS or Azure can cost a company lots more than when running it on the Oracle cloud. So a company could decide to place their Oracle databases on the Oracle cloud, and well, like applications maybe on Azure, for instance, Azure apps, and combine those two because there's also a like a partnership within between Oracle and Microsoft. So that could be a good multi-cloud strategy too, because companies, enterprise companies, for instance, have a lot of different technologies, a lot of applications, um, which are not all fit for one cloud or for another cloud. So multi-cloud or a hybrid cloud could, in this case, could be uh, the better way. And it's also to mitigate risk and take also advantages of different cloud providers. All have their own strengths and their weaknesses, so you can choose the best of all. So that's a good thing, I
Hmm.
think, for the larger companies.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to think of a use case, but I think you gave the best example. That is for Oracle databases, we can think of, okay, putting the database in the Oracle cloud and then putting our code part or maybe our, other part in the Azure or AWS, whatever it is. So yeah, that was really good real-time example. So one thing I observed, I'm not sure I'm correct. So correct me if I'm wrong, is that a lot of stable companies which are big, which have earned immense amount of business, they tend to go with Azure. I'm not sure I'm right. This is what I have seen, but they tend to go with Azure. They think this is like that is the better option. A lot of startups, though, on the other hand, they are moving to AWS. So I'm not sure whether I'm right or wrong, but do you think that is the scenario, or you have seen something different in the market?
Um, the second one you mentioned, I didn't see yet, but I agree with you, or I've seen it too, that a lot of companies are using Azure. Uh, yeah, I don't know
Hmm.
why. Microsoft has done a major shift when their new CEO, CTO, I don't know his name, came.
Hmm.
In 2006, no one would ever thought that Microsoft would have done open source or would have done
Correct.
Java. Now they hired a bunch of Java developers and they are developing Java on Microsoft, which their own proprietary product is .NET, but they are now yeah, promoting Java on Azure as well. So for a lot of companies, it's maybe yeah a good thing to use Microsoft Azure,
Correct.
and I
Correct.
see it a
Correct.
lot. A lot of companies are using it also because they uh, I've seen in the market in here like they for DevOps teams a lot of Azure DevOps
Correct.
skills were required. So a lot of companies
Hmm.
use Azure DevOps thing from Microsoft. Yeah, so I think
Um,
that's what I've seen.
We are also using Azure DevOps, so yeah, I can align with what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think one thing that you mentioned, and I totally agree with that, was Microsoft being entering into the open source. I think this I have discussed with the last guest on my podcast, because since we were discussing about software engineering and overall its future and what is going on currently, there I also discussed the same thing, that I think Microsoft is really very smart when it comes to business.
yeah.
They know when to enter when. That is really something that I admire about Microsoft, because
Mm,
when people thought, okay, these guys are doing everything for money, everything is proprietary, they suddenly came up, they created Visual Code, they created GitHub, they bought GitHub and all. So I think now they are at a point where they are playing a balanced game of money and community. So that is really something good. That is great. Something that I admire a lot, and that is where I think that when Google brought up Bard, uh, in the position of putting it against ChatGPT. Again, I don't want to go into the on the controversial part. I just want to say that one thing that I feel that Google put it in a wrong step is that they tried to put their hands in a lot of different tech, and Microsoft was really very smart at that
mm,
point. They picked up exactly what they thought was having a good future, because a lot of projects I have seen, like they are, one is, I think, Google Loom project was one of the project that I have seen which never came into picture. I have seen only
mm,
the video that they are planning to put up hot air balloons with internet access throughout the remote places where internet is not available. So they tried
yeah,
to do a lot of things, But I think that is what they are. That is a place where they kind of messed up. I is what I believe.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah, but yeah, again, it's a technology game, so everyone is trying to put in their hands.
Mm.
So now going aside cloud a bit, although we are still related to cloud only, what is going to come up next. But what I want to understand is one. So this is for again the noobs who are watching this video, those who are new. One thing is like, what is the concept of infrastructure as a code, and how it simplifies the management and deployment of cloud resources.
Yeah, infrastructure as code is something like, I always call it like treating your infrastructure resources as a software package. Actually, it's in fact it's a key concept when you practice DevOps, where you involve the managing and provisioning of your computing infrastructure, and you use it with readable definition of files, scripts, configuration like things, but you more treat it like as it is a part of your software components actually. So if you look at how infrastructure as code works, you don't need to manually configure an environment, but developers write a script or code or anything to automate the process of provisioning and deploying your infrastructure. And this code can be versioned just as any other code for your from your applications, and it ensures also consistency across your environments, because configuration which you apply to and which you store uh, um, in your code repository is always the same. Maybe some switches per environment. Like if you have development, you have some other requirements than production. But in general, everything is pretty much the same. So if you look at infrastructure and code, where some key things where you can think of is that it's reproducible, so you can ensure that your environment is created according to some standard configuration. For this, you can minimize the inconsistency, you can minimize errors. So if there's something in production, it should be also happening in development, because in fact it's the infrastructure configuration is the same everywhere. And other things where you can benefit from when you do infrastructure as code, that you have more speed and efficiency. So you can quickly set up a new environment, tear it down. It can speed up processes like testing and deployment, so that eventually leads to quicker development cycles. And if you look at business indicators, faster time to market, of course. And other things are, of course, the scalability thing. So you can scale up and scale down more easily in an automated way, actually, because you can build in some mechanism where it detects that your resources are running out. So you have to scale up your infrastructure. And if you look into the market, which are common infrastructure tools, are like Terraform for cloud, but of course Ansible
Uh,
from Red Hat, Chef, Puppet,
mm,
all these um, more or less declarative languages, where Puppet is, I think, a little bit more difficult than Ansible. But yeah,
mm,
it's still a good tool, a powerful tool.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Azure DevOps, like the DevOps in short, like CI/CD kind of continuous integration and deployment has changed a lot. And
Mhm.
looking at code as an infrastructure has made it a bit more easier in deployment and testing, as you said. So I think that part of product stage where we are worried about, okay, this is working here, will it work there or not, that part of worry has been reduced to a very very less extent. Now we have not to worry much about that. Usually, if it is working in the development environment, then it should work in the production as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes things don't work out, but yeah, I think.
Still, I must say that um, building. I've done projects where I was part of a CI/CD team, like an IT for
Hmm.
IT, where we created and maintained pipelines for developers and for production. But to build it up and designing it and build such a consistent pipeline is still a lot of work. So
Correct. Yeah.
investing the time in setting something up like that to work with all kinds of components, like in this case it was Puppet, Jenkins, combination with Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket. To get this all working and aligned is still a lot of work, but in
Correct.
the end, your time to market when it runs well is very good, very high. Yeah.
Yeah. I cannot disagree when you say that pipelines is not an easy task because I'm
No.
still, I think learning Git actions is still in my bucket list and is not coming up due to, I think of, okay, I should spend a lot of time and a lot of focus when it comes to learning something like that. But I think it's an interesting concept or an interesting piece of tech that we should, even though we are not going to work in that, we should be aware of to see the level of work that we can do with such kind of tools. I think that is really something that people should be amazed of. So yeah, next to that, what one more thing. So since we are now moving towards coding and development, there is always one topic that I like to bring up in the podcast or any kind of discussion that I'm having with any kind of expert is AI. So a lot of cloud platform providers are now providing different AI tools to train different models and train different create models, use the data. I think since I have attended a lot of meetups which are done by Microsoft Reactor, so they are usually showing their Azure platform services as well in between. So I've seen some of the uh, services is in action. I think
Mm.
one thing that I think that has become easy now is that people don't have to invest in their physical hardware. So as we discussed previously, what I want to understand is how does cloud facilitate this kind of training and deployment of AI model? And what do you think are the benefits of that?
I'm not really into AI at the moment, but I can see a lot of cloud providers are already providing some kind of an AI and machine learning capability as a service to lower the
Okay.
barriers for businesses and yeah,
Mhm.
to enable businesses to get more valuable insights in their data using AI and machine learning. So
Mhm.
I can give an example for that as well because I've seen like a security uh, dashboard which uses some machine learning models to detect anomalies of
Mhm.
uh, of logins, for instance, or detect something like a threat from outside, where um, uh, an attacker breaks in and follows some kind of pattern within this. And
Correct.
this pattern can
Mhm.
be discovered with these AI and machine learning models. So that's a real use case
Mhm.
which I know of. For the rest, I think a lot of the cloud providers already provide something like AI as a service or anything like that.
Correct, correct,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, I think one I have seen in live action again. Defender, Microsoft had added in the clouds, Defender security. Same
Right.
thing what you said. So it is using AI/ML to detect patterns and anomalies. And the more you work using Defender in action with your product, whatever is is going or data, whatever is flowing, it keeps on learning how the things are coming in, how things are going out. If there is any different, something out of pattern or something that it thinks or treats as an anomaly, then probably it will intimate you. So I think we are in a point where AI is getting into the cloud now, and they are trying to make sure that they leverage that technology to make all the services that we use a bit more easier.
Yeah.
So in a correct. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, well, if you look into what these cloud providers can can do in that, using this AI as a service, like you can uh, train models and models of your data, for instance, where you can predict future trends of your historical data. That's a thing. So predictive analysis, for instance, and
Mhm,
yeah, like you can see all these kinds of tools where, like. The police uses face recognition or object detection in
mhm.
images and videos where AI can play a role, I think. But as I told you, I'm not very technical around
It's
that.
fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. I think I can say I'm not technically expert either too much in AI, but I think I like the domain. I work a
Mm.
bit somewhat in that, but not too much. So I'm also I cannot say myself as an expert either. But I think that is something that I like to discuss always, because I like to take the point of I like to take the perspective that any expert in a particular domain is having about AI from that domain perspective. So you are having a cloud-based perspective. So what do you think about that? If I'm discussing something with a data scientist, which was my first podcast, so that time, what was the perspective of AI from that particular expert? What is the perspective of a software engineer who has worked in a company like GitHub? What are their perspective on how they see AI as a future? So it gives a wider perspective of where AI can go in which domain, and then maybe we can someone who is viewing, who wants to become a cloud expert or maybe a data scientist, can develop a perspective. Okay, I'm going in cloud, then what things I should know about AI, how much is required right now, and then okay, in future I might need to learn, but as of now I can learn something that is limited to this domain, and then I can move in, get into the job, and then I can go ahead with the rest of the domain. Is what I want to
Yeah.
develop for the viewers.
Yeah.
So yeah, so next to that, I think one question that again comes up is like, what are the benefits and challenges of serverless implementing serverless architecture in cloud-based application? So for the viewers, again, in 2 or 3 lines, you can just let them know what is serverless architecture, and then you can quickly just explain for the question.
So your question is, what are the benefits of serverless? Sorry.
Implementing serverless architecture for cloud-based application.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, I, I've, I've done not so much around serverless, but uh, so what I know is that uh, serverless architectures can developers allow more to focus on applications without worrying about the infrastructure management things. So that's a thing which can be a benefit for developers. Um, and yeah, you can use serverless applications function as a service. Just the cloud provider runs the function, and you don't need to worry anything about what's behind and how much resources you need. So it can be cost efficient, and yeah, actually anything a cloud provides already, the cost efficiency, the scalability, the speed of um, development for developers, because they don't need to worry anything about where they're running it. They can just develop a function and run it somewhere for a specific amount of time. So those are all kinds of benefits which you can think of, and yeah, especially also it's for fit for microservices as well, because functions, several functions can be written in different programming languages, so it can communicate through APIs, um, which or HTTP endpoints, which makes serverless architecture conducive for microservices actually. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, you can also, but there are also some kind of challenges, because the same you actually have with microservices that can be. pretty complex sometimes, because a function can be simple, but if you have hundreds of thousands of them, and the interactions of those as well can be pretty complex, I think, end up in pretty complex functions all together. So another thing of what functions, as I recall it from out of my head, they are stateless, so they don't store any data between sessions. So if your
Mhm.
application does require some kind of a state, then yeah, then you need to design your function still to store something in a database or something. And yeah,
Correct. Mhm.
I don't know if that's a good thing for a function actually. So,
Yeah.
and there are lots more, but I don't know anymore. I don't know all the benefits and the challenges
Yeah,
as well. These are the
I
ones
think
I.
heads up. I think heads up is more than enough for people who are starting right now, just now.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's always, yeah. And
There
since
are a lot of
I
mysteries
always
in the cloud still.
sorry,
I said there are a lot of mysteries in the cloud, as your title already says. We have
yeah,
a lot of mysteries to demystify.
correct.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the experience that I had is that right now, so people are a lot of confused when it comes to shift. So those who are having a traditional approach of working in IT, they are having a hard time to shift between domains. Or even the new students who are coming out of an engineering, they are also pretty much confused. So whenever I get, I get to meet junior. Students who are still in final year of colleges, a lot of questions are in their mind: which domain to take, what I want to do, this I want to do that. But a lot
Mm.
of, so most of the students, what the mistake they do is that they go with just the buzzwords. So this is one experience that I have. So in I think 3 years I have seen guys of my age or who are junior than me. So what they'll do, if you'll consider AI as a technology, they'll just go and they will run the models which are shown in a tutorial, and then they'll say, okay, I am aware of machine learning. And when there is a time to do that in real time, because this is my own experience, so when this is a time to do in real time on real time data, they don't get the correct accuracy. And they are like, okay, I used to get 86% accuracy and now I'm getting 40%. I don't know anything. So that is something that I think people are having. That's the main reason I started the podcast, and I'm keeping it generic, is because I want to give I want to give people a perspective or understanding that, okay, you don't have to go with the trends or the trending words that are just going on. First you clear what you need, and then you go with the that particular domain, or the structure of the knowledge that is required for that domain. So people
I
are
think
quite
that's
confused even. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Michelle.
I said, I think it's a good advice. I can give you another example of. I was business manager before my current role, and we had a lot of customers which were running actually old technology, but we're still running it because they have invested a lot in the years of developing applications around it, to buy the software, to buy the support. So and there are a lot of tech companies which are following these buzzwords and helping customers which are focusing on new strategies, but there are also a lot of companies which still remain on a little bit older technology, or have plans to migrate, but migration takes maybe 5, 6, 7 years to migrate application. So it's always good to know older technology as well, and as you already mentioned, not to go with every buzzword you hear. So, and do it in a more like, yeah, a good way of, yeah, learning something new, but not running behind every buzzword you hear. So that's a good
Correct.
thing. Good
Yeah.
conclusion.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that is really something worth of an insight. I think that everyone should take what you are saying as well. And yeah, I think we are almost at the end of the podcast. Although
Mhm.
one question that I always keep for the end, and that is, so where do you see cloud computing going in next 5 years? What do you see the future of cloud computing?
Um, I can see. Well, I to my understanding, it will evolve more and more. I think AI will play a big role. I also see some of the companies which are a little bit going back to on premises sometimes, not as a trend or so, but still there are some of the companies which are a little bit reluctant to go entirely to the cloud. But I also know a bank here in the Netherlands which is has the strategy to everything in the cloud everything in the cloud unless there's a good reason not to do so. Um, but if you look at future trends, then I think yeah, multi-cloud will be I think the thing to take care to be aware of. Multi-cloud
Mhm.
strategy will be a thing which companies will certainly are will choose. So I think it will grow more and more as something like which is a common thing within the next few years.
Yeah, I think we are looking to the great future for the cloud computing as well. And
Mm,
hopefully, we'll see a lot of transitions like ChatGPT. There will be a
yeah.
lot of transitions in cloud as well. And hope for the
Not to
best.
mention like IoT, for instance, as well. I've participated in something like a pilot project of uh, IoT um,
Hmm.
in within the municipality of Amsterdam, where they wanted to include a lot of IoT and smart city concepts to enable civilians to share cars, to share bicycles, to have it all in one platform together, public
Hmm.
transport and all kinds of things. They call it smart cities, but there's more into that. But these are the examples I know, and that this all was leveraged by some cloud providers who were facilitating IoT devices, for instance, for bikes,
Hmm.
IoT devices for other stuff like parking spots or shareable cars or anything. So I think for also for cloud, that's a future I predict which will grow
Hmm.
in the future.
I think, yeah, since I'm very passionate about IoT, and whenever I hear IoT, I'm like, okay, okay, what we can discuss about IoT. So I think Barcelona is one of the country that they have implemented smart city concept in the city, and they have
Mm.
implemented most of the IoT stuff, in the city, like smart street lights, parkings, and all. They have done that. Once I have seen the video, I'm not sure where that thing is now. It was like 4 or 5 years back. I have seen one of that video that how technology is going to reshape the world. Cloud and
Mm.
IoT will have a very vital role to play in this coming future, as you are saying. I think a lot of the things where there is a huge workforce required, the companies or the governments will surely try to make it automate using different devices and cloud and different projects and products. So
Mm.
it's gonna be a huge transition when it will happen, but surely it will happen. I think that should be really exciting as well as scary at the same time.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, yeah, we are looking into a very cloud physical, like digital plus physical environment in the future, and there I
mm,
think cloud will be at the very top notch position, because without cloud we cannot do anything
yeah,
in this kind of scenario. So
exactly.
yeah, I think we are at the end of the podcast, and I am again really very thankful to you for giving your so much valuable time to me, and that too in your busy schedule all the way from Netherlands. I'm really happy because I was really excited about this project, this podcast. So thank you, Michelle, again. And Yeah, guys, I think this is the end. If you have any kind of doubts or any kind of questions, you can put it in the comment box. I'll leave the LinkedIn handles of both of us, Michelle as well as mine, in the description. Make sure you connect, but don't bother him too much. So he'll be busy usually. So hope you all got some valuable insights in this, and keep innovating. Thank you, guys. Take care.